हेलो डियर स्टूडेंट्स, आज हम पढ़ेंगे एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट टॉपिक प्लांट फिजियोलॉजी का। इसका नाम है बायोलॉजिकल नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन। देखो, जो मैंने पहला वाला वीडियो, इससे पहले जो मैंने नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन के बारे में जो वीडियो डाला है, उसमें हमको ये पता चला होगा कि व्हाट नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन इज़। फिर से मैं बोलता हूँ, नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन हम डिफ़ाइन करते हैं जब एटमॉस्फेरिक नाइट्रोजन गैस तब्दील होता है, कन्वर्टेड इनटू द अमोनिया बाय रिडक्शन। अब जो पहला वाला वीडियो था उसमें हमने ये दिखाया था कि कैसे नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन होती है बायोलॉजिकली, जिसमें लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म इन्वॉल्व नहीं होते हैं। इस वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे बायोलॉजिकल नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन के बारे में। देखो, ये बायोलॉजिकल नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन होती क्या है। इट इन दिस टाइप ऑफ नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन, the living organisms are involved. That means इस नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन में लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म का काम बनता है। लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म ही ये कन्वर्जन करते हैं, एटमॉस्फेरिक N2 को अमोनिया बनाते हैं। दैट मीन्स इफ इट इज़ नाइट्रोजन गैस इन द एटमॉस्फेयर, when it is converted into the ammonia by the reduction, and here if living organism is involved, that means this type of nitrogen fixation is known as biological nitrogen fixation। फिर से मैं बोलता हूँ, it is nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, and when this nitrogen gas which is present in the atmosphere is converted into the ammonia by the reduction with the help of living organism, this type of nitrogen fixation is known as biological nitrogen fixation। अब हम देखेंगे which are the living organisms which have the property of converting this atmospheric nitrogen gas into ammonia, that is nitrogen fixation। This property of nitrogen fixation, this property of nitrogen fixation is not present in all the living organisms but is restricted only in the some only in the फिर से मैं ये वीडियो कंटिन्यू करता हूँ। हम करते थे बात बायोलॉजिकल नाइट्रोजन फिक्सेशन के बारे में, and which are the living organisms in which this property of nitrogen fixation is present। मैं यहाँ पे लिख रहा हूँ, this property of nitrogen fixation is restricted only in some microorganisms, in which you will see that bacteria and cyanobacteria are prominent। Not in all bacteria, not in all cyanobacteria, but only in some bacteria and some cyanobacteria the property of nitrogen fixation is present। And what is a prerequisite for this nitrogen fixation to be present in these bacteria is an important enzyme। What is that enzyme? That enzyme is known as nitrogenase, an important enzyme which is responsible for converting nitrogen gas of atmosphere into ammonia। Look here, if it is a nitrogen gas again and it is converted into NH3, that means ammonia by the reduction, and the enzyme for this nitrogen fixation is nitrogenase। This is the enzyme which is responsible for this nitrogen fixation, and this enzyme is not present in all the living organisms. It is present in some bacteria, it is present in some bacteria, and it is also present in frankia and actinomycetes। Frankia is an actinomycetes, that is a filamentous bacteria in which this enzyme has also been found, and hence this frankia can also convert nitrogen gas into ammonia, hence nitrogen fixation can occur। Now you have read about the biological nitrogen fixation and the organisms which are involved in this biological nitrogen fixation, that is bacteria, cyanobacteria and frankia. Now we are going to discuss what are the types of biological nitrogen fixation. This biological nitrogen fixation is divided into two main types. Two main types. Depending upon the type of organisms involved, that is the biological nitrogen fixation is divided into two main types depending upon the type of organisms which are involved in the nitrogen fixation. Number A is free living nitrogen fixation, and number 2 is symbiotic nitrogen fixation. That means this biological nitrogen fixation is divided into number A, free living nitrogen fixation, and number 2, symbiotic nitrogen fixation, depending upon the type of organisms involved. First, we will discuss about what is free living nitrogen fixation. In this type of nitrogen fixation, an organism, that is nitrogen fixing bacteria or nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria, that is nitrogen fixing bacteria or nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria. Live freely in the soil, live freely in the soil, and carry out nitrogen fixation. It is very simple here. Look here. The organism, that is nitrogen fixing bacteria or the nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria, they are living freely in the soil without making any kind of association with any other organism. While living freely in the soil, they fix atmospheric nitrogen. That means they convert atmospheric N2 gas into ammonia. And here you will see the main organisms. First of all, we will discuss some cyanobacteria, especially nostoc is there, it is a cyanobacteria. Anabina is there, it is also a cyanobacteria. They have the property of converting N2 into NH3 while living freely in the fields. Hence, this type of nitrogen fixation is known as free living nitrogen fixation. There are a large number of bacteria which also carry out free living nitrogen fixation, like azotobacter, like Bijerinkia, like Rhodospirillum. These are the main bacteria which live freely in the soil, and while living freely in the soil, they carry out nitrogen fixation. That is why it is known as free living nitrogen fixation. Here you will see that this azotobacter, this Bijeringia, they are aerobic in nature. What does aerobic means? That means they are respiring aerobically, and Rhodospirillum is anaerobic in nature. That means this type of bacteria perform anaerobic respiration. Another type of nitrogen fixation is known as symbiotic nitrogen fixation. In this type of nitrogen fixation, in this type of nitrogen fixation, a nitrogen fixing bacteria form an association with other living organism, and while living with other organism, they carry nitrogen fixation. There are a large number of examples of symbiotic nitrogen fixation, and I am quoting here a few. The first and foremost nitrogen fixation is the rhizobium bacteria. This rhizobium bacteria form root nodules in the roots of leguminous plants. And these root nodules become the sites of nitrogen fixation. Here you will see that rhizobium bacteria form an association with the leguminous plants like soya bean, like groundnut, like beans. These are the leguminous plants, and while living in the roots of these leguminous plants, these rhizobium bacteria form nodule-like structures which are known as root nodules, and these root nodules then become the sites of nitrogen fixation, and it is a symbiotic type of nitrogen fixation, as here two living organisms are living together. Another type of symbiotic nitrogen fixation is found in lichens. In lichens, you will see that lichens is an association between fungi and algae. If here you will see if the algal member is a member of cynophyceae, also known as cynobacteria, that is nostoc, that is anabina. These are the cyanobacteria. These are the members of cynophyceae, that is nostoc and anabina. If in lichens the algal member is the member of cyanobacteria or member of cynophyceae in the form of nostoc, in the form of anabina, then it is also a symbiotic nitrogen fixation which occurs in lichens by the algal member, and the algal member here will be member of cynophyceae or cyanobacteria in the form of nostoc or anabina. Another type of symbiotic nitrogen fixation is the frankia. While living in the roots of non-leguminous plants like alnus, like myrica, like casuarina, These are the plants, that's Casuarina, Elnas, Myrica. They are not leguminous in nature. They are non-leguminous plants. And in these non-leguminous plants, an actinomycete is known as frankia form root nodules, and this frankia also has an enzyme. That enzyme is known as nitrogenase, and this nitrogenase carry out their nitrogen fixation, that is reduction of N2 into NH3. Now, what we have read in this video, I will repeat some of the points here, very important points, very important points. First of all, what is biological nitrogen fixation? It is a type of nitrogen fixation in which nitrogen is converted into ammonia, but with the help of living organisms. When in nitrogen fixation living organisms are involved, it is known as biological nitrogen fixation. And what are the organisms, what are the living organisms which are responsible for biological nitrogen fixation? Are bacteria, some of the bacteria, not all bacteria, some of the cyanobacteria, not all cyanobacteria, and another member of actinomyces known as frankia. What is important for these microorganisms to carry nitrogen fixation is the presence of an important enzyme known as nitrogenase. This nitrogenase has the property of a reduction of this nitrogen into ammonia. Now, we have discussed the biological nitrogen fixation. Now we are going to discuss the types of biological nitrogen fixation. As I have already said that there are two main types of biological nitrogen fixations. Number first, free living nitrogen fixation, and number second, symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Free living nitrogen fixation means that type of nitrogen fixation in which nitrogen fixation is carried out by those living organisms which live freely in the soil without forming any association with any other living organism. And here I have quoted so many examples, like you will see that it is the nostoc which live freely in the fields, rice fields or other any field. Anabina is there, azotobacter is there, Bergeringia is there, rhodosuperiolum is there. These are all the free living organisms which carry out nitrogen fixation. But here you will see that nostoc is aerobic, Anabina is aerobic, azotobacter is aerobic, Bergeringia aerobic. These are all aerobic. Nostoc, Anabina, azotobacter and Bergeringia, these are all aerobic, while as rhodospermism anaerobic in nature. That means it carry out anaerobic respiration. Another type of nitrogen fixation is symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Here you will see that the two organisms, that is the nitrogen fixing bacteria or cyanobacteria, live in association with other organisms, and during living with other organisms forming an association, they carry out nitrogen fixation. The first and foremost example of this symbiotic nitrogen fixation is rhizobium bacteria, which form root nodules in the leguminous plants, and while forming root nodules they carry out nitrogen fixation. Another example is lichens. Lichens, as we know, is the association between fungi and algae. In lichens, if the algal member is the member of cyanophyceae or member of cyanobacteria or member of blue green algae, these all names are the names of simply the cyanobacteria. Blue green algae, also known as blue green algae, also known as cyanophyceae, also known as cyanobacteria. Examples are nostoc and anabina. If in a lichens anabina is a member, then nitrogen fixation can occur, that known as symbiotic nitrogen fixation. If member is nostoc, then that is also known as symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Another important and very important is the frankia. It is a filamentous bacteria, also known as actinomycetes. It forms the root nodules. It has the potential of forming root nodules in the non-leguminous plants. There are so many non-leguminous plants where it forms root nodules, like Elnas is there, Myrica is there, Casuarina is there, and while forming root nodules, it fixes atmospheric nitrogen gas and ammonia. That is nitrogen fixation and symbiotic nitrogen fixation. Thank you for this video, and I am coming with another video in the plant physiology. Thank you.